The alarm in the council chamber was still ringing when I walked in, and every eye in the room turned toward me at once. I am Laura Bennett, and I was the only human standing in a hall built for creatures 3 times my size. The Dravith delegate on the left had skin like polished stone. The small, quick-eyed Corveni beside him were whispering to each other in a language that sounded like static, and in the center, on a raised platform, stood Ambassador Senec, the being who had just finished reading out a verdict that would change everything for my species. "Humans need safeguarding," Senec said, his voice calm, almost gentle, as if he were talking about a child who had wandered too close to a fire. I did not sit down. I did not lower my head the way the protocol officer beside me was frantically signaling for me to do. I looked straight at Senec and asked the only question that mattered. From whom, exactly? The room went silent. Not the polite silence of diplomats choosing their words. A real silence, the kind that comes when someone has said something nobody wanted to hear. Senec's eyes flickered, just for a moment, toward the Dravith delegate. It was quick, barely there, but I had spent 3 years in this chamber, learning to read the small things. A glance can say more than a speech. "The galaxy is a dangerous place," Senec finally said. "Humanity is young, reckless. Your history is full of conflict. We have seen what young species do when left unwatched." "You mean you've seen what young species do when they refuse to be controlled?" I said. A murmur ran through the chamber. My protocol officer, a nervous man named Ethan Cole, put a hand on my arm as if that would stop me. "It would not. The safeguarding protocol has already been approved," Senec continued, ignoring me completely now, speaking instead to the record keepers floating near the ceiling. "Effective immediately, Earth and all human vessels will operate under the oversight of an assigned guardian. This is not punishment. This is protection." "Protection from whom?" I asked again, louder this time. Nobody answered. That was the second time nobody answered, and by then I understood something important. This was never really about protecting us. Something was scaring the council, and they did not want to say its name out loud. I thought about the last 6 months. 3 supply convoys had vanished near the edge of council space, in the same quiet stretch of stars we called the Long Dark. No wreckage, no distress calls, no enemy fleet ever seen. The council had called it an accident the first time, bad luck the second time, and by the third time, they had stopped explaining it at all. Instead, they had turned their attention to us. Convenient, I thought. Blame the loud ones. Blame the ones who fight back. It is much easier than admitting you do not know what is out there. "Ambassador," I said, keeping my voice level even though my hands were shaking with anger, "if you truly believe humanity is the danger, then explain the ships that vanished before any human vessel was anywhere near that region." Senec's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then a new voice cut through the chamber, deep and resonant, coming from a tall figure stepping out from behind the platform. I had not noticed him before. He was easily 7 feet tall, with gray-blue skin, sharp golden eyes, and a presence that made the air feel heavier. "I will be her guardian," the figure said. Ethan Cole nearly choked beside me. I turned to face this new arrival, this creature who had apparently already been chosen to watch over my entire species like a babysitter watches a toddler near a swimming pool. "And you are?" I asked. "Threll Vantor," he said. "Of the Dravith fleet. I have been assigned to observe humanity and report on your stability." "Stability?" I repeated, letting the word sit there, heavy and insulting. "Yes," Threll said, without a trace of shame. "The Council believes your species is a threat to galactic order. I intend to determine whether that belief is accurate." I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I looked past him, straight at Senec. "Fine," I said. "Send your guardian. Let him watch us. But when he sees the truth, I want it on record that I ask this question today. From whom exactly does humanity need safeguarding? Because I do not think it is us you are afraid of." Senec did not answer. He simply nodded to the record keepers, and the session was declared closed. As the chamber began to empty, Ethan leaned close to me, his voice low and worried. "Laura, you cannot talk to the council like that. They could have grounded every human ship in the sector." "They already did something worse," I said, watching Threl Vantor stride toward the exit, his golden eyes scanning the room like he was cataloging every human face for later use. "They decided we were the problem before they even looked for the real one. So what do we do now?" I watched Threl disappear through the chamber doors, his shoulders squared, his expression unreadable. "Now," I said, "we let him watch, and we make sure he sees exactly what kind of danger we really are. Not the danger they think we are, the danger we could be, standing beside them, if they would just stop being afraid of us, long enough to ask for help." Ethan did not look comforted by that. Honestly, neither was I. Because somewhere out past the edge of council space, in that quiet stretch of stars called the Long Dark, 3 ships had vanished without a single scream reaching anyone's ears. And instead of searching for what took them, the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy had decided it was easier to put a leash on humanity. I walked out of that chamber with my chin high and my heart pounding, because I already knew something the council refused to admit. Whatever was out there in the dark had not come for us yet. But it would, and when it did, I intended for humanity to be ready, whether they had given us permission to be dangerous or not. 3 days later, my communicator chimed with new orders. I was being reassigned to the frontier station Halcyon, out near the edge of explored space, the very same region where those convoys had disappeared. My new companion for the assignment had already been chosen for me. Threl Vantor. I stared at the message for a long time before I answered it. Somewhere deep down, underneath the anger and the frustration, a small part of me was almost glad. If the council wanted to send their guardian to watch me, then fine. I would take him straight to the edge of the dark, and we would find out together exactly what kind of monster the galaxy was truly afraid of. Because it was never us. It never had been. The transport that carried Threl Vantor to Halcyon Station arrived 4 days after my orders came through, and from the moment the airlock hissed open, I could tell this assignment was not going to be simple. He stepped out wearing full Dravith ceremonial armor, polished and gleaming, as if he expected a parade instead of a half-empty frontier station with peeling paint and flickering lights. Behind me, my small crew stood at something resembling attention. Ethan Cole, still nervous as ever. Grace Whitfield, our chief engineer, arms crossed, clearly unimpressed. And Nathan Pierce, our security officer, watching Threl the way a dog watches a stranger who has wandered onto its porch. "Quarters have been prepared for you," I said, keeping my tone professional. "I assume you'll want to begin your observations immediately." "I already have," Threl said, his golden eyes sweeping across the station's corridor, taking in the mismatched furniture, the hand-painted signs, the faint smell of coffee drifting from the mess hall. "Your species builds things quickly and carelessly." "We build things quickly because we don't have the luxury of taking 100 years to finish a hallway," Grace muttered, just loud enough for him to hear. Threl turned to look at her, clearly surprised that a lower-ranking officer would speak so directly to him. "Careless engineering leads to failure. Careless engineering keeps 300 people alive out here, with half the budget the council spends on ceremonial armor," Grace shot back. I raised a hand before this could turn into an argument on day 1. "Let's get you settled first. You can judge our engineering after you've seen it actually work." Over the next several days, Threl shadowed nearly everything we did. He watched Ethan run diagnostics on the shield array, taking notes on a small device strapped to his wrist. He observed Nathan drilling the security team, his expression unreadable as he watched humans laugh and joke with each other, even while practicing serious defensive maneuvers. "Your soldiers do not take their training seriously," Threl said one afternoon, standing beside me on the observation deck as Nathan's team ran through drills below. "They take it seriously," I said. "They just don't see the point in being miserable while they do it." Laughter before conflict suggests a lack of discipline. "Or it means they trust each other enough to relax," I said. "Fear doesn't make people better at their jobs. Trust does." Threl said nothing, but I noticed he kept watching the drills long after that conversation ended. It was on the 6th day that everything changed. We had a supply convoy scheduled to pass through the outer relay point, a quiet stretch of space just beyond Halcyon's main sensor range. It was routine. We had run this exact route a dozen times before. Threll insisted on joining the escort mission personally, claiming he wanted to observe our defensive protocols in a live scenario. I should have said no. Looking back, I wish I had said no. We took the shuttle Meridian out to meet the convoy, a small, fast vessel with just enough room for myself, Threll, Nathan, and a 2-person flight crew. The convoy itself was 3 cargo haulers, unarmed, carrying medical supplies and equipment for the outer settlements. Everything was normal for the first 20 minutes. Then the sensors screamed. "Contact," the pilot called out, her voice tight. "Multiple contacts, closing fast, no transponder signal." I moved to the sensor station immediately, my heart already pounding. The readings made no sense. Whatever was approaching us did not match any known ship design in our database. No council registry, no known hull signature. Just a strange, shifting energy pattern that seemed to bend and twist around itself like smoke. "Identify," Threll said, standing behind me, his voice sharp now, all traces of condescension gone. "I can't," I said. "It's not in any database, human or council." The cargo haulers began broadcasting distress signals almost immediately. Something was moving between them, weaving through the convoy with terrifying speed, faster than anything I had ever tracked before. "Evasive maneuvers," I shouted to the pilot. "Get us behind the haulers now." The pilot banked hard, and for a moment I thought we might actually clear the area safely. Then one of the cargo haulers simply stopped transmitting. Not destroyed, not exploded, just gone silent, its lights flickering out one by one like a candle being smothered. "What is that?" Nathan asked, staring at the sensor display, his voice barely above a whisper. Before anyone could answer, the shifting energy signature turned toward us. "It's coming this way," I said. Threll moved without hesitation, stepping toward the cockpit. "Give me the controls." "Absolutely not," I said. "You don't know our systems." "Then guide me," he said, already strapping into the co-pilot seat beside our stunned pilot. "I have combat reflexes beyond your species' capability. Use them." I did not have time to argue. I called out heading adjustments, while Threll's hands moved across unfamiliar controls with startling precision, guided by my voice and years of Dravith pilot training. We weaved between debris fields left behind by the vanishing hauler, narrowly avoiding whatever invisible force had swallowed it whole. Then the shuttle shuddered violently. Something had struck us, though nothing appeared on any visual sensor. "Hull breach, Deck 2. Grace's voice crackled over the comm from the station, monitoring us remotely. "Laura, you need to get out of there." "Everyone hold on," I shouted, bracing myself as the shuttle spun sideways. Threll fought the controls, his usually calm voice now strained with effort. For the first time since I had met him, he looked afraid, truly afraid, not performing confidence for an audience, just a creature staring at something he did not understand and did not know how to fight. I made a decision in that moment that surprised even myself. I unstrapped from my seat, moved to the emergency console, and manually rerouted power from our non-essential systems directly into the engines, giving Threll the extra thrust he needed to break away from whatever was pursuing us. "Now!" I shouted. "Full burn! Now!" Threll slammed the throttle forward, and the shuttle lurched away just as another cargo hauler went dark behind us. We broke free into open space, the strange energy signature fading from our sensors as quickly as it had appeared, as if it had simply lost interest, or perhaps decided we were not worth the effort. Nobody spoke for a long moment after that. The only sound was our own ragged breathing and the soft hum of the damaged engines struggling to stabilize. "You saved this vessel," Threll finally said, turning to look at me, something unfamiliar in his golden eyes. "You had no combat training equal to mine, yet you acted decisively while I struggled to control an unfamiliar system." That's what we do, I said quietly, still catching my breath. We adapt. We don't wait for perfect conditions. We use what we have. We returned to Halcyon Station in silence, the wreckage of 2 lost cargo haulers behind us. No explanation for what had taken them beyond a strange shifting pattern that matched nothing in any council database. That night, Grace ran every scan she could on the debris field data we had gathered. Ethan cross-referenced it against every known hostile signature the council had on file. Nathan reinforced the station's defenses without being asked twice. I found Threll standing alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars, his ceremonial armor removed for the first time since his arrival. "You were afraid out there," I said, standing beside him. "Yes," he admitted, without hesitation this time. "I have fought in 3 border conflicts. I have faced hostile fleets. I have never encountered anything that moved like that, or vanished ships without leaving a single trace." "Neither have we," I said, "but at least now we're looking for it together instead of pretending it doesn't exist." Threll was quiet for a long moment. "The council will not want to hear this." "No," I agreed. "They'll probably find a way to blame us for it too." "They may try," Threll said, and for the first time, something in his voice sounded almost like respect. "But I saw what happened on that shuttle today. I do not think humanity is the danger the council fears." "Then who is?" I asked, echoing the question I had asked in that chamber, the question nobody had ever truly answered. Threll looked back out at the stars, toward the quiet, empty darkness where 2 ships full of good people had simply ceased to exist. "I do not know," he said, "but I intend to find out, and I would rather have you and your crew beside me when we do." I looked out at those same stars, thinking about the strange shifting pattern that had swallowed our convoy whole, thinking about a council too frightened to admit the truth, too eager to blame the loudest, most stubborn species in the galaxy instead of facing whatever was really hiding in the dark. Whatever it was, it had made a mistake that night. It had shown itself to me, and I do not give up on a mystery once it has taken something from people under my protection. Not ever. The debris we recovered from the lost convoy told us almost nothing, but almost nothing was still more than the council had offered in 6 months of silence. So Grace, Ethan, Nathan, Threll and I spent the next 2 weeks turning that almost nothing into something real. Grace isolated a fragment of the strange energy signature trapped in the shuttle's damaged hull plating, a residue unlike anything in any recorded database. Ethan cross-referenced shipping logs going back 3 years, searching for any pattern in the disappearances. Nathan pulled old council incident reports that had been quietly filed and even more quietly forgotten, and Threll, using his Dravith military clearance, accessed classified fleet records that no human should have ever been allowed to see. It was Threll who found the first real clue. "There have been other losses," he said one evening, gathering us around the station's main display. "Not convoys, fleet vessels, Dravith warships, Corveni science stations, even a council diplomatic transport, all vanished the same way, all in regions bordering what your species calls the Long Dark." "How many?" I asked. 23 vessels in the last 4 years, Threll said quietly. "The council has never made this public." 23 ships, Grace repeated, disbelief thick in her voice. "And they blamed us for 3 cargo haulers." "They needed someone to blame," Threll said. "Something they could control, punish, contain. Whatever is out there cannot be threatened or negotiated with. Humanity, however, can be given rules, restrictions, a guardian." I felt my jaw tighten. "So we became the scapegoat because we were the only threat they thought they could manage." "Yes," Threll said, no longer trying to soften the truth the way he might have 2 weeks earlier. "I am sorry, Laura. I believed the council's assessment when I arrived here. I no longer believe it." Ethan pulled up the energy signature Grace had extracted from the hull plating, cross-referencing it one final time against an old, nearly forgotten Dravith archive Threll had unlocked for us. The match, when it finally came, made the entire room go quiet. This pattern appears in records going back nearly 600 years, Ethan said, his voice hushed. Different names in different eras, the Silent Current, the Hollow Reach. The oldest Dravith texts call it simply the Unmaking. What is it? Nathan asked. Nobody knows, Threll admitted. Every civilization that has encountered it describes the same thing. Ships vanish without warning near unstable regions of space, usually in isolated systems far from major fleets. No survivors, no wreckage, no warning before contact is lost. And the Council has known about this for centuries, I said slowly, and instead of preparing for it or asking for help, they decided the safest response was pretending it did not exist and controlling the one species too loud and too stubborn to look away. Yes, Threll said. I looked around the room at my crew, people who had spent 2 weeks chasing a mystery nobody in power wanted solved, and I made a decision that I knew would not be popular with the Council. We're going to the Long Dark, I said. Grace stared at me. Laura, that's exactly where 23 ships disappeared. I know, I said, but hiding from it hasn't worked for 600 years. Maybe it's time somebody actually looked instead of running the other way. Threll studied me for a long moment, and then, to my surprise, he nodded. I will requisition additional Dravith support. If we are going to face something the Council has feared for centuries, we should not go alone. It took another 10 days to prepare. Threll managed to convince a small contingent of Dravith scout ships to join us, commanded by a sharp, quietly determined officer named Danielle Foss, who had lost her own brother to one of the 23 vanished vessels years earlier and had never received a real explanation why. I want to know what took him, she told me plainly, the day she arrived at Halcyon Station. I do not care what the Council wants kept quiet anymore. I liked her immediately. We assembled a small combined fleet, 3 human vessels and 4 Dravith scouts, and set a course for the edge of the Long Dark, into the quiet, empty region where 23 ships had vanished and the Council had chosen silence over truth. The journey took 6 days. On the 5th day, our sensors picked up the first sign of something ahead of us, a faint, shifting distortion at the very edge of our detection range, the same strange pattern that had swallowed our cargo haulers whole. There, Grace said, pointing at the display, same signature. It's larger this time. Much larger. How much larger? I asked. Big enough that I don't think it's a single ship anymore, Grace said quietly. I think it's a fleet. Threll's expression darkened. Then the rumors were true. What rumors? Nathan asked. Old Dravith legends claim the Unmaking does not simply destroy ships at random, Threll said. It gathers. It waits in isolated regions, drawing in isolated targets, growing stronger with each vessel it consumes, until it is ready to move against a larger target entirely. A larger target, like what? I asked, though some part of me already suspected the answer. Danielle's voice came through on the comm, tight with alarm. Laura, I'm picking up long-range communications chatter. It's coming from Carveth Station. My stomach dropped. Carveth Station was a major Council outpost, home to nearly 40,000 people from a dozen different species, one of the largest population centers along the entire frontier. Distance? I asked. 2 days from our current position, Danielle said. And Laura, the chatter isn't routine. They're requesting emergency support. Something is already moving toward them. I looked at Threll, and for the first time since I had met him, I saw genuine fear in his golden eyes, the kind of fear that came not from facing an unknown threat, but from finally understanding exactly how dangerous that unknown threat truly was. 600 years it has waited and gathered strength in the shadows, Threll said quietly, and the Council spent that time hiding the truth instead of preparing for the day it finally moved. Then we don't have 600 years to fix their mistake, I said, already moving toward the comm station. We have 2 days. I opened a direct channel to Council Command, transmitting everything we had gathered, the energy signatures, the 23 vanished vessels, the ancient records Threll had unlocked, all of it, every piece of truth the Council had spent centuries trying to bury. The response, when it finally came, was not what I expected. It was not denial, it was not dismissal, it was raw, unguarded panic, the voice of a Council official finally forced to admit what they had always feared most. "Carveth Station is under direct assault," the voice said, shaking. "We need every available vessel. Please, whatever you have, send it now." I looked around at my small combined fleet, 3 human ships and 4 Draveth scouts, facing something that had swallowed 23 vessels whole, and was now about to move against 40,000 innocent lives. "Set course for Carveth Station," I said, "full speed." Threll looked at me, something steady and resolute settling into his expression. "Together?" "Together," I said. "The Council spent centuries deciding who to fear. It's time we showed them who they should have trusted all along." We turned our small fleet toward Carveth Station, toward the very heart of the danger the Council had spent 600 years pretending did not exist. And for the first time since that verdict had been read aloud in that grand chamber, I finally understood the full truth behind the question I had asked that day. Humans need safeguarding, they said. From whom, exactly? I finally had my answer, and it terrified me more than anything the Council had ever accused humanity of being. But it did not stop me. If anything, it made me move faster, because somewhere ahead of us, 40,000 people were about to learn exactly what humanity looked like when it finally stopped asking for permission to help. Carveth Station came into view 18 hours later, and even from a distance, I knew immediately that the reports had not exaggerated the danger. The station itself was a massive ring structure, home to nearly 40,000 people from a dozen different species, and around it, the space had gone wrong in a way I had never seen before. Stars seemed to flicker and dim near the station's outer edge. Debris from destroyed defense platforms drifted in slow, silent spirals, and weaving through it all was the same shifting, shadowy pattern we had tracked from the long dark, except now it was not one signature, it was dozens, moving together with terrible, coordinated purpose. "That's not a fleet," Ethan said quietly, staring at the display. "That's a swarm." "Options," I said, keeping my voice steady even though my pulse was hammering. "Council reinforcements are still 4 hours out," Danielle reported from her scout ship. "Carveth's own defense grid is failing. They cannot hold that long." "Then we buy them the 4 hours," I said. Threll turned to me sharply. "Laura, our combined fleet is 7 vessels. That swarm number's in the dozens." "I know the math, Threll," I said, "but if we do nothing, 40,000 people die waiting for help that arrives too late." "I am not doing nothing." He studied me for a long moment, and then, slowly, he nodded. "Then tell me what you need." I pulled up the tactical display, my mind racing through every scrap of data we had gathered over the past 3 weeks. The shifting energy pattern was not truly invisible, just difficult to track with conventional sensors. Grace's earlier analysis had shown it disrupted standard scanning frequencies, but it left a faint trail in older, analog-style detection systems, the kind most modern fleets had long since abandoned as obsolete. "Grace," I said, "can you retrofit our sensor arrays to broadcast on the older detection bands, the ones from before standardized Council sensor protocols?" Grace blinked, surprised. "That technology is decades outdated." "Exactly," I said. "It's outdated, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind, which means it wasn't designed with this enemy in mind." While Grace worked, I turned to Nathan and Danielle. "We need every fighter craft we have running defensive patterns around Carveth's most vulnerable sections. Not offense first, protection first. Buy time for civilians to reach shelter." "And after that?" Nathan asked. After that, I said, we make that swarm regret ever coming near this station. Threll leaned over the display, studying the chaotic movement of the shifting signatures. They do not fight like a disciplined fleet. They fight like a single organism, reacting, adapting, but without true coordinated strategy. If we can predict individual movement patterns, we may be able to isolate and target them one at a time, rather than facing the swarm as a whole. Then let's give them something unpredictable to react to, I said. Something they've never adapted to before. 20 minutes later, Grace's retrofitted sensors came online, and for the first time, we could actually track the swarm's movements with real clarity. They moved in overlapping loops, testing Carveth's weakening defenses, searching for gaps to exploit. There, Grace said, pointing to a cluster of 3 signatures breaking away from the main swarm, heading toward an unshielded maintenance section of the station. They're going for the weak point. Nathan, Danielle, I said. Intercept. Threll, you're with me. We're going to draw the rest of the swarm away from the station. Draw them where? Threll asked. Into open space, where their numbers matter less and our maneuverability matters more, I said, already moving toward the shuttle bay. We give Carveth's people time to evacuate the vulnerable sections while the reinforcements close the distance. It was, by any reasonable measure, a dangerous plan. 2 vessels acting as bait for dozens of hostile signatures with no clear understanding of their true capabilities. But waiting had never protected anyone from this enemy. 600 years of silence had proven that clearly enough. Threll and I launched together, our 2 ships weaving out toward the edge of the swarm's formation, broadcasting every active sensor signal we had, making ourselves as visible and as tempting a target as possible. It worked. Almost too well. The swarm turned toward us almost instantly, dozens of shifting signatures breaking away from Carveth Station, streaming out into open space in pursuit. My comm crackled with Grace's voice, tight with tension. Laura, that's nearly 30 signatures converging on your position. Then let's make sure they regret the trip, I said, already guiding my ship into the first evasive pattern Threll and I had planned together. What followed was the longest 12 minutes of my life. We wove between shifting attacks that seemed to come from nowhere, guided only by Grace's retrofitted sensors calling out approaching threats just seconds before they struck. Threll's piloting, honed through years of Draveth combat training, combined with my own instinct for adaptation and improvisation, kept us alive through maneuvers that should not have worked, that broke every standard tactical protocol either of our species had ever developed. On your left, I called out, watching a cluster of 3 signatures converging toward Threll's flank. He banked hard, narrowly avoiding contact, then looped back in a maneuver so unconventional that 2 of the pursuing signatures collided with each other in the confusion, flickering and vanishing entirely. They collide when confused, Threll said, his voice sharp with sudden realization. They do not truly coordinate, they mimic and react. Then let's confuse them a lot more, I said. We spent the next several minutes deliberately weaving unpredictable patterns, crossing paths, reversing directions without warning, forcing the swarm to react to movements that made no logical sense. One by one, the shifting signatures began colliding with each other, flickering out in the confusion, their numbers steadily thinning. Behind us, Nathan's voice came through, breathless with relief. Laura, Carveth's vulnerable sections are fully evacuated. The maintenance breach has been sealed. Copy that, I said, still weaving through the thinning swarm. Threll, how are we looking? Fewer than 10 signatures remain, he said. But Laura, my shield strength is failing. I cannot maintain these maneuvers much longer. I glanced at my own display, watching my ship's systems flashing amber warnings across every panel. We were both running out of time, but the reinforcements were still nearly 2 hours away. We hold as long as we can, I said. Every minute we buy is a minute Carveth's people get to safety. We continued the desperate dance for nearly 40 more minutes, our ships taking damage with every passing exchange, the remaining swarm signatures growing more erratic, more difficult to predict as their numbers dwindled further. It was during one final evasive maneuver that disaster struck. Threll's ship took a direct hit, something invisible and terrible, tearing through his shields and into his hull. His vessel spun violently, alarms blaring across my display as his systems flickered and failed. "Threll," I shouted into the comm, already redirecting my own ship toward his failing vessel. "Report." Silence answered me, followed by static, followed by nothing at all. My heart pounded as I closed the distance, watching his ship drift, powerless, directly into the path of the remaining swarm signatures. "No," I said, pushing my engines past every safety threshold, angling my ship between Threll's drifting vessel and the approaching threat. I do not remember consciously deciding to do what I did next. I only remember acting, guiding my ship directly into the path meant for his, absorbing the impact meant for a dying vessel, my own systems screaming in protest as my shields buckled under the strain. The impact threw me violently against my restraints, my vision blurring, alarms shrieking around me. But when the world stopped spinning, I was still alive, and more importantly, Threll's ship was still intact, drifting safely away from the remaining threat. "Reinforcements arriving," Danielle's voice cut through, filled with relief and disbelief in equal measure. "Council fleet inbound, 30 seconds. The remaining swarm signatures, sensing the sudden shift in numbers, began to scatter, fleeing back toward the long dark as quickly as they had appeared. Reinforcements arrived just as the last signature vanished from our sensors, and Carveth Station, battered but intact, remained standing, its 40,000 people safe behind newly restored defenses. I managed to guide my damaged ship back toward the station, my hands shaking against the controls, my body aching from the impact. Threll's vessel, powerless but stable, was towed in alongside me. When the medical team finally pulled him from his ship, unconscious but breathing, relief washed through me so powerfully that I nearly collapsed right there on the docking platform. But that relief was short-lived. Danielle's voice came through my comm, quiet and heavy with grief. "Laura, it's Ethan." My stomach dropped. "What happened?" "His ship was providing cover fire near the maintenance breach," she said. "He held the position until the last civilian made it to safety. He didn't make it out in time himself." I stood there on that docking platform, surrounded by the wreckage of a battle we had somehow, impossibly, survived, and felt the full weight of victory and loss settle over me at exactly the same moment. Carveth Station stood. 40,000 people were alive. Threll was alive. But Ethan Cole, nervous, careful, endlessly kind Ethan Cole, who had spent 3 years worrying about protocol and diplomatic consequences, had given everything he had to protect people he had never even met. I closed my eyes, allowing myself one single moment of grief, before straightening my shoulders and turning back toward the station, because there was still work to be done, and Ethan would have wanted nothing less from any of us. The swarm had been driven back but not destroyed, somewhere out past the edge of council space, in that quiet stretch of stars called the Long Dark. Something ancient and patient was already regrouping, already preparing for its next attempt. But for the first time in 600 years, it had met resistance instead of silence. It had met humanity, refusing to run, refusing to hide, standing directly in its path without waiting for anyone's permission to do so. And I intended to make certain that resistance never stopped again. Carveth Station's medical bay was crowded with wounded from a dozen different species when I finally found a quiet corner to sit down, and it was there, 3 hours after the battle ended, that Threll finally woke up. "You should not have done that," he said, his voice hoarse, the first words out of his mouth the moment his eyes focused on me. "Done what?" I said, though we both knew exactly what I had done. "Placed your ship between mine and that swarm," he said. "You could have died." "So could you," I said, "and you did, for about 4 minutes, according to your own medical readout." Threll was quiet for a long moment, staring at the ceiling of the medical bay. "Why would you risk everything for me? I was sent here to judge your species, to decide whether humanity deserved to be controlled. Because that's not why I did it, I said. I didn't do it to prove anything to you or the Council. I did it because you're my crew, Threll. Whether the Council assigned you to us or not, that's what you became out there. And humans don't leave crew behind. He turned his head slowly to look at me, something unreadable in his golden eyes. Ethan Cole did not leave his post either. My throat tightened at the mention of his name. No, he didn't. I read his final transmission, Threll said quietly. He said, "Tell Laura the shelter held. Tell her it was worth it." I had to look away for a moment, blinking hard against the sudden sting in my eyes. Ethan had spent 3 years nervously reminding me not to provoke the Council, not to speak too boldly, not to risk consequences we might not survive. And in the end, he had given everything without a moment's hesitation, without waiting for permission, without needing anyone's approval. He was right, I finally said. It was worth it. 40,000 people are alive because of what we did today. Because of what you did, Threll said. I have spent weeks observing your species, searching for the recklessness the Council warned me about. Instead, I found something else entirely: adaptability, loyalty, a willingness to act without waiting for perfect certainty. These are not flaws, Laura. These are strengths the Council has spent centuries failing to understand. Before I could respond, my comm chimed with an incoming priority transmission. Ambassador Senek's face appeared on the display, and for the first time since I had known him, he looked genuinely shaken. "Officer Bennett," he said, his voice careful, measured, entirely different from the condescending tone he had used in that chamber weeks earlier. "The Council has reviewed the full report from Carveth Station. We would like to convene an emergency session. Your presence, and that of Guardian Vantor, is requested." "When?" I asked. "Immediately," Senek said. "There is much the Council needs to discuss, and much, I believe, that requires correction." 3 days later, after Threll had recovered enough to travel and Carveth Station's defenses had been fully restored, we stood together in that same grand chamber where this entire journey had begun. But this time, the room felt different. The murmuring alien delegates were quiet, subdued, none of the casual dismissiveness that had filled the air during my first visit. Senek stood at the platform, and when he spoke, his voice carried none of its previous condescension. 600 years ago, he began, our ancestors first encountered an enemy they could not understand, could not communicate with, and could not defeat through conventional means. Rather than face that failure honestly, the Council chose silence. We buried the truth, hoping the threat would remain isolated, contained, someone else's problem to solve eventually. He paused, looking directly at me. When humanity joined the galactic community, young, unpredictable, and unwilling to simply accept our authority without question, we saw an opportunity. A species we could label as the source of instability, allowing us to continue avoiding the truth we were too afraid to face ourselves. "You made us your excuse," I said quietly. "Yes," Senek admitted, and the honesty in that single word carried more weight than any speech he could have given. "And in doing so, we nearly cost 40,000 lives at Carveth Station, because we spent our resources controlling the wrong threat instead of preparing for the real one." Ambassador Korov, seated beside Senek, rose slowly to speak. Guardian Vantor's reports from these past weeks have been reviewed extensively. His observations, along with the events at Carveth Station, have made clear what many of us refuse to see. Humanity's traits, the very traits we labeled as dangerous instability, proved to be precisely what saved that station when our own forces could not respond in time. Threll stepped forward beside me. "I was sent here to judge humanity's stability," he said. "I have witnessed adaptability under pressure that our own rigid protocols could never achieve. I have witnessed loyalty that placed the safety of others above personal survival, again and again, without hesitation. I have witnessed a species willing to act decisively when every logical calculation suggested waiting for certainty instead." He paused, looking at me before continuing. "I came here believing humanity needed to be controlled for the safety of the galaxy. I now believe the opposite. The galaxy needs humanity's willingness to act, precisely because so many of us have spent centuries too afraid to act ourselves." Unquote. The chamber remained silent for a long moment, the weight of that admission settling over every delegate present. "The safeguarding protocol," Senek finally said, "is officially rescinded, effective immediately." I felt something in my chest loosen, a tension I had been carrying since that first chamber session weeks ago finally beginning to ease. "However," Senek continued, "the threat that took Ethan Cole's life, and 23 vessels before him, remains active. It retreated from Karveth Station, but it has not been destroyed. We believe it will return, likely stronger, likely more prepared for the resistance it encountered." "Then we need a real plan," I said. "Not silence, not blame, an actual coordinated response, built on cooperation instead of control." Senek nodded slowly. "The Council proposes a new arrangement. Not a guardian assigned to observe humanity, but a genuine partnership. Human vessels stationed alongside Council fleets along the frontier, sharing intelligence, resources, and strategy freely, as equals rather than subjects." I looked at Threll, who nodded in quiet agreement, and then around the chamber at delegates who, for the first time since I had known them, looked less like judges passing sentence, and more like people finally willing to ask for help. "We accept," I said, "on one condition." "Name it," Senek said. "No more secrets," I said. "If something out there threatens this galaxy, every species deserves to know the truth, immediately, without 600 years of silence standing between us and the chance to actually prepare." "Agreed," Senek said, and this time I believed him. In the months that followed, humanity's fleet expanded along the frontier, not as prisoners under observation, but as partners trusted with defending the very border the Council had once claimed we were too dangerous to approach. Threll remained with our crew, no longer a guardian assigned to judge us, but a friend who had chosen to stay by choice rather than obligation. Danielle Foss finally received the answers she had spent years searching for regarding her brother's disappearance. Cold comfort, perhaps, but comfort nonetheless. Grace continued refining our retrofitted sensor technology now being shared freely across multiple species fleets, giving everyone a fighting chance against an enemy that had once moved through the darkness unseen and unchallenged. We built a memorial on Karveth Station for those lost in the battle, Ethan Cole's name engraved alongside dozens of others from a dozen different worlds, a reminder that courage was never limited to a single species, and neither was loss. Standing before that memorial one quiet evening, Threll joined me, looking out at the stars where the long dark still waited, patient and ancient, somewhere beyond the edge of everything we understood. "Do you regret asking that question in the chamber that first day?" he asked. "From whom, exactly?" I thought about it for a long moment, remembering the anger I had felt, the frustration of being judged before I had ever been given the chance to prove anything. "No," I said. "I'd ask it again. Somebody needed to ask it. Somebody needed to stop pretending the real danger was the one everyone was too afraid to name." "And now?" Threll asked. "Now that you have your answer?" I looked out at the stars, thinking about Ethan, about Karveth Station, about 600 years of silence finally broken by a single, stubborn question asked in a room full of people too comfortable with their own fear. "Now we stop asking who needs safeguarding," I said, "and we start asking who's brave enough to actually do it." Threll smiled, something I had never seen from him before that moment, small and quiet, but entirely genuine. "I believe," he said, "that question has already been answered. Somewhere far beyond the frontier, in the quiet, patient dark, something ancient continued to wait and gather its strength. But for the first time in 600 years, it was not moving toward silence and unpreparedness. It was moving toward humanity, standing shoulder to shoulder with every species brave enough to finally stop looking away. And we would be ready. We always would be,